Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Ewelina Olchowska, multi-passionate creative designer and founder of my dear design studio, Studio Dumka. And I'm so excited to share today's episode with you guys featuring my dear guest, Bahati, on the show today. So a little backstory on Bahati and how we met and connected. Let's go back a month ago. I ventured down to New Haven for a networking event with the Women's Business and Networking Council here in Connecticut. And one of the first people that I come into contact with after, we did our introductions at this networking event was Bahati, and we get to talking and, we're chatting, of course, as one does at a networking event, who you are, what you do, what your story is. And I lead with my branding work that I do at Studio Dumka, and then follow with my podcast. And she got curious, asked me, what your podcast is about. And I tell her, this season is focused exclusively on change and transitions and all that stuff. And immediately perked up, got super curious, mentioned she would love to be on the show. So I'm like, let's do it. And so we had connected a few weeks after, got to talking, tell me more about who you are, what you do, what your story is, and let's kind of just plant some seeds around where this conversation can go. We ventured all over the place with Bahati in this conversation, from personal life experiences, navigating change, all the way down to her business and starting her business, Balebé, which is this incredible, intentional mindfulness beading studio, to deciding to go back to her full-time job as a researcher with analytics and math and data and, this very logical side of her, which, by the way, I found so fascinating. The fact that here is this multifaceted powerhouse woman who spends equal time doing half math, data analytics, and half super intuitive, mindful, feminine, creative type work. Talk about a lovely balance of both things. But yeah, that last piece on the business especially was so pertinent and relevant to me as you guys know, if you've listened in, the questions, the guests that I've had on the show, asking them about their business journeys, hearing guests either start businesses to leave them to go back to full time, or start businesses to leave them to start another business, or enter a different season of change, whether it's with a relationship or a move or travel or whatever that could be. It's really been a season of deep inquiry and curiosity on my end as I'm having all my personal questions with, what the heck is going on in my life, specifically with Studio Dumka and all that. And so to hear Bahati so vulnerably share her experiences, and, we were chatting a bit after we finished recording even deeper on this transition of the balance that lies with what happens when you step away from something that, yes, you have poured your heart and soul into, which could be your business, could be a passion project, could be whatever. It could be a home that you're living in, a relationship. This applies to anything and everything. You guys know if you've ever left something that you spent many years pouring into and investing, it's not the easiest thing. But the beautiful thing is when you step away from that thing, or when you surrender or acknowledge that, hey, maybe something has to shift, or you become open to doing it another way or another alternative, there is so much beauty that lies on the other side of that. And so there was a deep reassurance, a deep resonance, and just a validation and definitely feelings of being seen with this conversation with Bahati. And, with every chat that goes out into the world that I share on this podcast, my hope is always to leave you guys with very relatable stories and wisdom nuggets that you can either implement in your life or really just walk away from and sit with and see where can you go deeper or question or potentially shift and change some things in your personal life. And so I'm really excited to get this one out because it's chock full of really from the heart vulnerable shares. And Bahati, thank you so much. I just want to really express my deep gratitude to you for coming on and just really sharing so beautifully all that you did. And yeah, without further ado, guys, I'm going to pause here and let you guys hear this chat with Bahati. And as always, let me know what you guys think. Reach out to me, hello@studiodumka.com, or DM me on Instagram. But here you guys go. Enjoy this one.
Actually, May is the color of yellow. which
Mm-hmm.
represents joy and optimism. And
Ooh.
I got to tell you, I am feeling optimistic. Yeah, I'm feeling
Ooh.
optimistic.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This actually transitions perfectly into my icebreaker question, which is what is something that has been bringing you joy this month? I know it's May 1st right now
Mm.
as of the recording
Yeah.
of this podcast, but you can speak
Yes.
to last month or within the last week. Just what's top of mind that comes for you when you hear that question?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, joy right now, I'm really excited about. I'm not there yet, but this transition of kind of getting aligned, right? Like
Mm,
even in my home space, clearing things out, reconnecting with some old friends, you know what I mean? Kind of allowing some other relationships to kind of, transition in a different way as well. So I'm just optimistic and joyful about new possibilities, right? Possibilities are
mm,
still there, and
yeah.
so, kind of how we think about it, I think is what shapes everything.
I'm curious if you've always had this optimism about you, or is this something that's been a practice that's evolved? Or I guess what has your relationship been with this more, yeah, we could say like optimistic point of view and perspective?
Yeah, you know what? I do think that I don't know if it's optimism, definitely possibility thinking though. I have a
Possibility,
hard
yeah.
time with, oh, there's nothing we can do. I have a hard time with that.
Mm,
Like a really hard time with that, right?
yes.
So I think I do lean towards, hey, what can we do? You know what I mean? No matter the circumstance. But I think as I've gotten older, much more cautious, becoming a mother, even more cautious, right?
Yeah.
Trying to line things up and make sure everybody gets to where they need to get to. And now in this new phase, I have a high school senior, and I have one who's a junior in college, so she'll be a senior next year.
Mm,
I'm kind of just getting back to possibilities again, right? Kind of being, I guess, a middle aged person, which is crazy for me to think about, but the
yeah.
numbers are there, right? The
Yeah.
numbers say I am middle aged. So, embracing that and just leaning into it. So I can't say it's always been a practice, but definitely, I'm definitely a person who thinks about, hey, well, what can we do? Like that's always, but that's definitely a part of kind of my ethos, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, I that resonates for me a lot. The expression of glass half empty, glass half full. I've always skewed on the glass half full, if not glass overflowing type of idea
Okay.
of just always really believing that yes, there's either another option or another way, or looking at the bright side. And my mentor that I've been working with now for the last year or so will really always remind me that the only choice that we ultimately have is our perspective. So no matter what
Mm,
things come at you in life, you could either choose to see it in a negative light or a positive light. And sometimes that's easier said than done, especially when you're feeling all the feels. And I mean, related to the topic of change and transitions and everything that we're exploring in this season, that's not always the easiest thing. And so, before I dive in with you on just talking more about this topic and hearing more of your story, I know we connected, I don't even remember when, a couple weeks ago, and you just kind of planted a few seeds of different moments in your life that I'd love to just
hmm
like peel layers back on with you. But for context for the audience, if you could just share with us, who is Bahati? Like, how do you describe yourself to people? And, I always pose this question to guests at the beginning. And, again, simple question, but it could be so complex because we're all the things. And so, how do you actually
Yes.
explain who you are and
Yes.
what you
Oh
do?
my gosh.
So, however you feel called and comfortable, tell us who you are.
Yeah. Who is Bahati? Oh my gosh, that's such a layered question.
Mm,
I'm a researcher, right?
mm,
That's definitely a foundational part of who I am, very analytical, thinking all the different possibilities, right? That word again. Definitely a creative person, right? I am a champion of the arts and a champion of cultural preservation. And I think that culture a lot of times is what grounds us, in terms of like, connecting us like at the human level. So definitely a lover of the arts. And then, I'm also mom, wife, right? And business owner. I think that's how we connected, entrepreneur. So my journey into entrepreneurship is still evolving. I don't know that I see myself as because my husband's a serial entrepreneur. He's like an
mm.
entrepreneur, right? It's like, you like to do that, but you can make that a business. Like that's his whole
That's where his mind goes immediately.
Oh my God, my children are like, no, dad. Like my daughter learned how to do her hair. She's like all excited. Like, she can save money. She can, save time. Right now she has agency. If she wants to go somewhere, she can do her hair. And he's like, hold on a second. I think that,
Let's monetize this right now.
so that's not me, right? That's not
Yeah.
me. My journey into entrepreneurship, very, very, I don't know, very different, very organic, I guess I would say. But that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. And again, the question, I love how people answer this because they take it in so many different ways. And it's hard, with labels or titles that are kind of limiting. It's like, how do you use one word to speak to all the things that you are? But you touched on so many things. You mentioned researcher, creative, then some things from personal life. So I think this actually can lead us nicely into maybe just starting on your sentiments around the word change and transition, because I think something that was really just perked my curiosity a lot when we connected a couple weeks ago is, well, actually, before I even go there, I will say that when we first met at that networking event, and I was kind of, we were
Yeah.
chatting, and I was telling you
Hmm.
what I'm
Hmm.
doing, what my podcast is about, and you were like, "Ooh, you have a podcast? What's it about?" And blah blah. And I mentioned the topic, and you're like, "Ooh," like you got like especially curious about it.
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe we could just start by me asking you, like, when you hear the word change, like, what feelings come up for you around that?
Yeah. So change for me, I get the butterflies
Ooh.
immediately. Immediately. So I said I'm a researcher. I have a background in math, both a bachelor's and a master's in math. So as a mathematician, that's one of the foundational parts of math, right? The delta change, that y over x, right? Change, measuring. That's what measurement's about. Like something's going on. What else is going on? Kind of how can we quantify that and put numbers to it? So from that point of view, I embrace it. But in real life, it's kind of crazy, right? Because I'm definitely a planner. Like I said, that's that research thing, a planner, very cautious. And I've had a lot of change in my life. And so I get the butterflies. I do. I really do. I'm learning to lean into it, right?
Mm,
Embrace it. And I say
yeah.
learning like literally in real time,
Mm-hmm.
embracing it. Because it can be, I mean, it's the only constant though. I mean, we're literally changing every day. Like it sounds
Mm.
cliche, but it's the truth. We live every single
Ooh,
day.
I kind of love how you
We're
said that.
changing.
Like change as a
Yeah.
constant. Because I mean, when I hear the
Yeah.
word, like change is dynamic, it's fluid, it's always moving. But to hear you say it from that lens, like it literally is always happening. And so in that light, it is a constant. That's really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, so, trying to, so it's always, I mean, even if you look scientifically, right? So the earth is,
Hmm.
right? So that's why the sun goes up, it goes down. It's literally, it's incrementally going up, then it incrementally goes down, right? So that's
Yeah.
always happening, no matter what. But then we try to ground ourselves, right? We try to
Hmm.
ground ourselves in what we have going on emotionally, personally, then our connections with others. And then sometimes I think our big, kind of North Star, whatever it is that we're trying to do. Most of us are trying to do something, even if it's, you know, get a job, get a new car, find a love, leave a love, right? you
Yep. Hmm.
You know what I mean? So we're always kind of looking to do so we're still changing regardless, but I think sometimes change can be imposed on us, right?
Hmm.
Change that we aren't looking for.
Yeah, the
And
sudden
that
like rug pulled out from under you feelings.
yeah. And also I've learned too about this secondary, I won't call it secondary trauma, but this secondary kind of energy, if you will, especially if you're like an empathic person where maybe you're stable, but a really close friend is going through a hard change, right?
Mm,
That
yeah.
impacts us. And depending on our level of empathy and how connected we are, it can be like you're going through, especially, if you are a parent, right?
Yeah.
It's like if your kid is going through, if your kid's having surgery, it's kind of like you're having surgery. I mean, not physically, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're doing all the stuff, all the research and the doctors and everything else, right? So it's it's one of those things that, you try to live with it, I guess, embrace it, use it to kind of channel it because it's something you really can't. Well, I guess when it happens to you, right, you can't necessarily control it. And what I really find interesting is that even the things that we can control, right? Like I could say, you know what? I want to open a new business. I have agency to do that, thank God, right? In the circumstances that I'm in. But I can control how much time I put into it. I can't necessarily directly control the outcome, right?
Yeah.
So that you got that kind of always going on. So just trying to stay centered through that.
Yeah, this last piece that you touched on, I love the sentiment, and it is true to an extent. Like, we have free will. Like, we could essentially, we can make a choice right after this call to your point, open a business or whatever, drive somewhere, do whatever it is. But I think something I've been sitting with a lot is this idea of expectations that we set on stuff, because, like, to your point about the business thing, it's like, yes, you could go forward and do the steps and do what it takes to do it, and then you might have an idea about it, but how much do you, like, how much is that idea going to actually come to fruition? And that's something that I've personally been grappling with a lot of, I don't know, just like having my mind too set on something, if that makes sense. And I found, I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, of like, because I'm a very driven person. I'll set a goal and then I work my ass off to achieve it. Like, let's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
go. But then there are those moments where I set a goal and I have this vision of what it's going to look like, and I move towards it and I try to do it, and it's just like not working out. And so then it's like that
Mm-hmm.
discernment that comes in that moment of like, ooh, okay, is this me trying too hard? Should I step back and pivot, course correct? Or do I like push through this because this is actually something meant for me to overcome? Or, they say like grow the adversity and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess in the world or realm of life changes that you had, or even just moments that you've overcome, I'm wondering if you've maybe experienced a similar thing of being so focused on like a
Definitely.
goal. Yeah, and maybe like where that discernment for you comes in. Because I found that's, ooh, sometimes it's such a tricky thing of like knowing when to let go and when to keep going.
Oh my gosh, knowing when to let go. Lord have mercy. That was the color of April. That was blue. The color of April is blue, and it's
Letting
like
go,
getting in the flow.
surrender.
Um, yeah, so it's really interesting because there's an African proverb that talks about how, you set a goal, but your goal cannot conflict with other goals, right?
Hmm.
So it's like we there's levels of goals. You have your master, your highest vision, so to speak, right? Let's say we want to get married or something. We want to build a bit. And then I think marriage is kind of tough because, that involves a whole nother person, right?
Mm-hmm.
We really can't control. But say something like having a business. For me, having this business was completely not in the cards. Well, I shouldn't say it's not. They were clearly in the cards because it happened, right? It
Yeah.
manifested, but it wasn't my plan. Is a better way to say it. So I'm a very artistic person, lover of culture, lover of beads. Ever since I was a child, I was introduced into beading and beadwork, and I just wanted to share the gift of beading. I would literally call people at local libraries to ask them if I could bring beads in,
Hmm.
would pay for the beads, bring them, set everything up. And my dear husband was like, yeah, no, I think this should be a business. I'm like, what are you talking about? We
So
can't
he
do that.
nudged you.
No.
He nudged you.
Like, our culture, we were talking about, and beading and beadwork, it's very prominent in, pretty much all the cultures, right? There's Europe, there's Asian, the African tradition, which is what we focus on, but there's Native in the Americas. But I'm like, this is our culture. No, I can't charge people. Clearly, he was able to convince me, about how it can be an enterprise and how transformative that can be for the community, making it an actual venture. So that was a huge change for me, mindset and shift, mind shift wise, I guess I should say. And it took several years. It did. I mean, even after, filing the paperwork and, people buying the beads, I'm all excited, making peace with that took time. And then I got there, but what I've
Yeah.
learned is you get there, wherever there is, and guess what? There's still more to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
There,
think,
there's still more to go.
hearing you say that, it's like you didn't plan for this business to unfold, but it did. And I imagine, like, over time, once you saw the momentum coming, you recognize, like, okay, there's something here. You start pouring your heart into it. You become emboldened by the mission and vision. You see it affecting people's lives and all the things that come with, like, running a business. So then probably goals started to surface of, like, okay, well, now maybe I want to grow it and then I want to expand it. But to your point of what you just shared, it's, I think the trick, and you mentioned it, is just like continuing to stay open and knowing that it's always going to be an evolution. And I think that's a beautiful reminder for myself, for anyone listening who might be guilty of those expectations being set. Because I think the beauty of not having any, or to what you shared, just being open, is it almost like it leaves this energy of mystery and surprise, which
Yes.
I'm sure you've probably experienced this in your life, because I could think of like many moments where there wasn't something I was expecting. I mean, the way your business started, right? Like you were never expecting that to happen, but when it did, maybe you could look back now and be like, ooh, like just feel surprised by it. And those are, I don't know, for me, those are like the best feelings. Like you don't expect something to happen and then it happens. You're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So, yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but just maybe reflecting on your share of the openness, the last piece that you mentioned,
Hmm.
and just the beauty that comes with that.
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to kind of, I don't know if I completely answered the question about setting goals, and I'm a very driven oriented person, but what I've learned is that that's I won't call it a trauma response, but it's definitely a protective measure because this is
Mm.
something I can control, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I have the goal, and I keep going until I get to the goal. Well, that gives me a maybe real or even imagined sense of comfort,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And then even ego wise, right? Now I've accomplished the thing. And depending on what the thing is and how other people view the thing, I'll throw one out there. I think marriage is a big one, right? Lots and lots of conversation about, you know what I'll tell you. This is the square root year. 2025 is a square root
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
And it's
There's your
also the
math.
year of the wood snake, right?
Ooh.
If you follow Chinese astrology, and it's a very, very powerful and transformative year, right? If you look it up, you'll see they tell you about some of the things that we're going to see this year, and we've already seen it. We are literally living through such an interesting and amazing time where we're literally seeing society and culture shape and shift, like in real time, all over
Yeah.
the globe. I mean, there's the U.S., but there are many other countries, right, who are making different choices. Some candidates are like, oh my gosh, they won. We didn't think they would. All of these things that are happening, right? So
Mm.
I'm only putting that into the context of this whole marriage conversation where, there's all this kind of talk about it. But I've been married for 18 years, right? And depending on, people and their mindset around that, for some people that is impressive, right? For me, it's impressive. You know what I mean? But I always have to check myself about, okay, you got your ego where it's like, oh my gosh, you've been married that long. Or, oh my gosh, you
Mm.
have two children. Oh my gosh, your kids are, whatever the thing is, right? At the end of the day, are you still being authentic? You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like the quality of the whole thing, and we know marriage is, there's all kind of ups and downs with that. But I think really kind of checking myself about like, okay, why am I pursuing this goal? Is it authentic? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Is it
Mm-hmm.
authentic? Is it about what other people will think? You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, what do I think?
Yeah.
That's been my question like the last maybe year and a half. What do I think? Even
Yeah.
with people who maybe are not happy with something, they might not be happy with it. Am I happy with it? You know what I mean? Because if I am, right
That's what
now, depending on who it
matters.
is,
Yeah.
obviously, partnerships, children, that could, your boss, right? Employers, what they think absolutely matters, right? So we want to, keep that in mind. But thinking about these goals that, I set, we set, I think the biggest thing is reflection
Mm-hmm.
and like balance. Because without goals, we wouldn't be on Riverside, right? These are people who have, serious knowledge of technology, and they forge ahead, right? That's why we have the cell phone. Now, I'm
Yeah.
old enough to remember when, I don't think, yeah, I'm old enough to remember when there were no cell phones. That's crazy, but I am, right? I remember when the car, like the cell phone, it started in a car. It was a car phone. And then it
Mm,
graduated to what it is now. People had goals, visions beyond what what was possible. You know what I mean? What was even, you could even imagine some people's vision, the Steve Jobs of the world, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Like, no, no, mm-mm. I'm gonna stay up. If I got to stay up all night, right? They become so enmeshed in
Mm-hmm.
that goal
Yeah.
and
There's
that
something
vision.
driving them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the little small goals towards the big goal. It doesn't happen um overnight. So it's interesting. It's really, really
Yeah.
interesting. Something to really kind of think about, especially as a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah, the
know.
authenticity piece you shared is so, so key. And my former people pleaser got activated as you were saying all the things about, looking to whoever, your parents, your partner, like it could be anyone, but doing things, like really checking yourself and asking, am I doing things for myself first? To your point, like being mindful, are you hurting anyone, this and that, but to the point where their voices start to overpower your own and where you start to feel uncomfortable or something's off and you feel that energy of force coming on, that's that invitation of like, okay, is this aligned for me or is this for someone else? And, I'm not married yet, but that topic has been a topic of conversation for years in my family because there's so much of a traditional like milestone life checklist, if we want to say,
Mhm. Mhm.
get the
Mhm.
job, get married, have the kids, etc., etc. And so I really struggled with this for a long time. I remember I got out of a long-term relationship. I was with a partner for 6 years. I think at this point 6 years, yeah, 6 years ago. And my parents took it so hard, like my mom especially, because her being an older Polish traditional woman, me at 20, what was this, 27 at that point, she was like, you're going to be single for life. Like, that's it, you know?
Yeah, no,
And
because for her, yeah,
yeah.
I can tell even so for me, I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so I remember seeing, even the idea of, like you said, getting married, even like having children. I remember being 20 and like, yo, I'm having all my kids before I turn 30.
Mm,
Right. And I only had two, but I'm having all my kids before I turn 30. Right. And then it wasn't that 30 was old, but I was really deeply rooted in the culture. Right.
yeah.
We live in a completely different culture now. We live in a culture of, listen, you can freeze your eggs. That's the thing. You can get a surrogate. It is what it is. Right. That's a personal choice. Right. So there's so much more choice, but I think it boils down to really knowing who you are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And are you willing to struggle? Right? Can you still be happy with the struggle? The struggle's there. Because that's what I have to tell my daughter. The struggle's there. Marry, don't marry. Have kids, don't have kids. Have a business, have a career. Don't. The struggle's there. It's going to be a struggle. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter, right? Not like a tough, tough struggle, but it's life. I'm privileged. I feel I'm privileged, in a lot of different ways, being educated. There are people who love me. Not to be funny, I live in the United States, right? This is the only place I've ever lived, but I'm aware, right, that navy blue passport, it actually means something when you go other places, right? Just in terms of the access that's here. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So putting all that into context still though, right? What do you really, really want? And I think that we're seeing that we've gone from, like you said, your mom, we've gone from because I can think of my grandmother, right? Great grandmother. I was lucky enough to know two great
Mm-hmm.
grandmothers from Mississippi, one from Mississippi, one from Arkansas. Like you said, very traditional, right? Not thinking about school and all of that kind of good stuff. Going to my grandmother and my mom, who like kind of broke the mold, went to college, all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of young women now, these conversations on TikTok and everywhere else of like, hey, let's do this trad wife thing to kind of go back to,
Right.
right?
Yeah. It's like a
Which
resurgence of that. Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
hey, wait a minute, hold on a second. I'm not trying to get up and give these people 50 hours when I can be at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
who thought that this was a good idea? But I think it's about the choice. We know this, right? It's about the choice. You
Yeah.
can choose at any point in time, right? You can choose to kind of do these different things. So we're kind of seeing that. And it really shows up, I think, in relationships, specifically marriage, right? Because marriage is a traditional institution, right? It really is. It's a traditional institution. And I do think it can be, and I'm not, you know, I haven't been married that long, right? But you can shape it. You can have those conversations. But once you're identified as someone's wife or someone's husband, I think in any culture, there are things that kind of go along with that, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. Because you could be with your partner and never marry. I mean, that's like an option, right? You do not have to
Another
go and
choice.
form.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, you don't have to formalize the, not to be funny, the business part of it, really. The legal, I shouldn't say business, the legal
Right.
part of it, right? We don't have, yes, there's, you know, tax benefits and all this other thing, but it's really the social thing of it, right? And it's just about, do I value that and why? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I value it. I do. It was like, because my husband, he's going to watch this and be like, really? But yes. It's like, well, you know,
He's
I
gonna
mean, we
come
love
after
each
you.
other.
Just
So,
joking. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he was like, you know, we love each other. I mean, I don't understand. And I was like, hold on. We absolutely well, actually, I quote, I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to get married. You're like, I would love to marry you. Like, you're my guy. You're my first love. But if that's not what you want, I'm still going to go get married. Like, you know what I mean? For me,
It was
it
important
was
to you.
very important. But, and I think that's what makes the struggles, you kind of get through them because it's what you really want,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Yeah.
what you really want. And if you don't really want it, it's like a crazy thing to do if you don't really want it. I'm just saying. Like,
Mhm. I can imagine.
crazy thing to do. Like, nah, if you don't really want it, and, you know, you can think of like the Oprahs of the world who just, you
Yeah.
know, still with her partner for, I don't even, it has what, 20 plus, maybe longer, 20 plus years, being very open about not thinking she could fit or not being comfortable with the traditional role part of it, but enjoying the partnership, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's real. Like, that's a real live situation. That's really real.
Yeah.
And it's something to really think about.
Yeah. I think about this conversation. It's so interesting because my mind's going in a bunch of different places. But I think the image top of mind for me is my grandparents because they've been married for 60, it's going to be 61, 62 years this year, which is like insane. My grandmother
That's
married
amazing.
My grandmother married when she just turned 18, and my grandfather is 10 years older than her. And not
Wow.
that it was an arranged marriage, but it was against her will. She didn't want to per se. But when she retells the stories, it's almost like she didn't have a choice. Growing up in Poland post war, like completely different conditions. And but seeing them now, and when I go and visit them, and I'm so fortunate to still have them alive. My grandfather turned 90, my grandmother is, turned 80. Like
Yes.
they live
Wow.
right in New Britain, so 10, 15 minutes from here. And really, it's a blessing to have them. But the thing that I look forward to the most and that I appreciate is asking them their life stories and hearing how they overcame struggle. And the perspective shift for me, just like all my concerns and ailments of things I'm dealing with, not to discredit them and like shove them aside, because there is truth and like merit to everything that we're going through. But it really does take me out of it and really helps shift my perspective to hear what they overcame and went through. And again, the more that I talk to them, it really has me craving and opening myself up to more of that traditional lifestyle and the idea of not, I want to say, like always running away from problems, but being rooted and really kind of having the opportunity to really face and work through it. And that is something that it's funny, like I'm sharing this because maybe it's top of mind because I moved in with my partner 2 months ago. So I'm like cohabitating with him. And this has personally been something that I've really been navigating of like learning to communicate one on one with him, not running away. Um, being more patient, watching my words, things like that. And what I'm realizing is if you really want it, to your point of what you're sharing, like if it's in alignment, which I know that it is, it's only when my ego gets in the way or, something's uncomfortable that I'm like, oh my gosh. But I'm like, no, if I really want this and I'm in it, then I'm willing to work on it. And oh my gosh, the growth I feel like that's taken me on the last couple months, especially since I moved in, it's like, whew. So the question that I want to ask you is what are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken away? And I know like it's going to be probably a podcast episode on its own, but we've gone here.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah. You mean as far as being married?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, girl. So I got married. I got married at 24.
Mm,
Excuse me, no. See, I had my daughter when I was 24. I got married at 26. I got married at 26. Had my son at 27. My husband was 28 when so I was 26. He was 28. I think that love is specifically marriage, right? Because I'm a card carrying avoider, like card carrying, like they can put it on my little star on my license. Like I will just like I'm not dealing with this. Like I'm just not. I can just separate, not physically, but emotionally.
check out.
I'm not here.
Yeah.
You know, it took me a long time to realize that's not really cool. I mean, it really did because it's like for a long time I'm like, yo, you said something that I didn't like. Therefore, I'm withdrawing. Like, you know what I mean? One and one get you to two all day of
Mm-hmm.
the week. Like, you know what I mean? But you learn, you learn that is one, it's not healthy, right? And two, there's someone else on the opposite end of that and what they're experiencing. So what I've learned the most is that love means you're willing to struggle because being married to someone, it's like a double mirror. You can see you, they can see themselves, good and bad. Things are going to happen that really bring out who you really are, right? And then what we just said, change. You're constantly growing through that process, right? And so is your partner. There's no way to really hide from that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, am I willing to struggle for this person? Is this person bringing enough to me that I'm willing to struggle? And for some people for me, it's like values. My husband and I share family values. We both love the arts and we both are visionaries, right? So we absolutely connect on those three things in a really, really solid way. But for somebody else, it might be, I won't say superficial, but maybe like money, right? Like that's
Yeah. They're out
right.
there. Those partnerships
It's
are
like,
definitely out there.
you know what I mean? And actually, yeah, they carry the one and it's like, yeah, actually this works for me. So it's like, and I think that even goes for friendship, right?
Yeah.
Because it's ups and downs at the end of the day. And again, as an avoider, I would kind of keep people kind of a little arm's length, right? Not like here. Because if they're here, now that, I'm open to going through the real emotions, right? Of disappointment, whatever the case may be. Now I'm challenged to keep my emotions in check, right? If I keep you here, I can just plateau. I put it on, level 6 and it just stays there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When you're here, and I've learned that, right, with a partner, like you said, you're living with, that's just not really conducive, right,
Right.
to growing the relationship because I believe that the definition of happiness is really growth, right? You're growing. And everyone has, for some people, like I have friends who are like, listen, getting an apartment is growth for me because, how I grew up or whatever the case may be, right? Having my own apartment, maybe my own door to close is totally growth for some people. And other people are like, well, I grew up in a, maybe 3-bedroom home. And so an apartment's just not growth for me, right? So everyone's different in that way. But I would say, I think having a person who has your back no matter what is priceless. It's literally
Mm.
priceless. And I think walking through life with that person, you're kind of on a parallel line, if you will, because you're walking with your children, but your children, 9 times out of 10, they're in a completely different generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
right? So I have Gen Z children, right? And yes, I'm open-minded as much as I can be. There's not enough open-mindedness in the world to really get me to where they are. I'm people,
I'm a
right?
generation below you, Bahati, and I can't get behind Gen
Okay, well,
Z.
see, you see what I'm saying? So, like, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then my parents are boomers. My parents are boomers. My mom completely, again, very open-minded, very warm, very loving, different culture. What was acceptable in, when she was growing up in the 70s, here we are in 2025, and even things that you can say, right? We're more educated now, so we know even certain words are not appropriate, right? You and I, we know that. My mom, she knows it too, but she like, first of all, I'm 70 something years old. I'm gonna say what I want to say. I don't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I think that being willing to kind of really how it happened for me, like the shift, I thought about a goal. If I had a goal, I would struggle with it. I would, right? Like I would get a no, or maybe some, I don't know, whatever, maybe didn't sell something, maybe whatever the downsides would be, if maybe you have a podcast, maybe booking someone, maybe the guest, however it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would fight through that. I would literally find a way to fight through that. So emotionally, right, how can I apply that, with this other human?
Yeah. Oh,
And
the
it's a
dance.
constant. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a constant. I mean, a constant, constant.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting for me because what I've noticed is whether we call it struggle or discomfort or just like for
Right.
me, it's just like these uncomfortable feelings that come
Mm-hmm.
up
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, what in the heck? And you're like, do I run? Do I stay? Do I work through this? And it's been a lot of having to recognize that this is worth fighting for, that this is something to develop, to nurture. But to what you also shared on the growth piece is I feel like because it's going to be a year this month that my partner and I have been together. And I mean every like to your beautiful thing that you shared at the beginning is like change is always happening. But if I look at this last year for me, it's like, whoo, this person came into my life and it's like he fast tracked my change journey because of all these things that all these uncomfortable we can say like struggling feelings that I've had to navigate in facing what really might have been my ego or something that like I just wasn't seeing, and because of that I've become such a deeper self-aware person. My patience, I'm still working on it but like I can say that my patience has improved, communicating also, like all these things. And so I've just seen so much beauty in that. And I appreciate you like just sharing your like experience in that because I think there's so much in garnering from hearing how other people navigate these more intimate dynamics that you won't find on
Oh
social or the
no.
highlight reels and all that. And I'm
Mm-mm,
I'm
mm-mm.
fortunate to have really beautiful relationships with my best friends who have been married for a few years who will share some of that, and also coming to recognize like, okay, this is work, but if it's to your point like very much authentically aligned for you, then it's worth it. On the topic of being in relationship, like whether it's with your partner, you mentioned your kids, I wanted to go back to something you said at the beginning around navigating change but holding space for other people. You mentioned the empathetic piece of
Yeah.
like really going through it when someone else is going through something. So I don't know, tell us more about that. Like how do you, maybe it's an example that you experienced recently or in life, maybe how you had worked through that, and also just relationship with, almost maybe we can call them like boundaries. Like how do you grapple with someone else going through something that you inherently are feeling so much, it's their change journey, but you're in it? Because you said that and I'm like, yeah, I've been there for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Boundaries have been a struggle for me because culturally learning, well, you know what? It's been a struggle. I think what kind of has grounded me recently is I had to get back to, okay, what do I want? Like, okay, do I want to go to this party? I can be honest and say, maybe I don't want to go. Okay. Is it important to daughter, son, mom, husband, what have you, right? And so kind of allowing that to guide me in terms of, where I am, where I want to be. It's a constant struggle, right? Because as a wife, right? And that's what I mean. As a girl, when I was a girlfriend, I'm there for you, right? But culturally and like society wise, for me, it wasn't the same. You know what I mean? Whereas now, if I were to like, let's say, be, at a family function, maybe not looking well or whatever, my family would probably be like, is everything okay? They would probably ask my husband, like, hold on, what's going on? Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
like you become a little bit more connected. So it's a constant, especially for me with the, marriage and also with the children. That's a very difficult one that I'm learning now as they become young adults. Right. And I've had to learn too, also that, people not to rob my children of, I won't say failure, but living life, right? Learning, experiencing things, right? And kind of coming up with things in my mind to say, okay, I can't wait for them to ask me to help, right? I can take a step back and say, hey, I see that. I know what it means to me. I think you might be going in the wrong direction, right? But taking a step back to say, one, this is a completely different time. It really is. And so the rules aren't always the same. You know what I mean? Even like something very small. So my son, he's going to prom. He's going with a date. He's really excited. And so is she. She's a beautiful young lady. And even the dynamics of, okay, who kind of asks who, you know what I mean? Just like, I remember how it was for me, right? Maybe the guy asks, he gets the vehicle, he picks you up. It's different now. Maybe they go as friends, right? It's just so different where you have to kind of take a step back. But I think at the end of the day, when I get too caught up on other people, I don't find it to be selfish, but I always say, okay, hold on. What's going on with you though? Right? You want to make sure that everybody's safe. Are you safe? Because I've learned that I would try to kind of protect, let's say, my children from something, to not do the work to protect me from something.
Yeah.
Right? So, and it could be big or small. I mean, obviously not small things, right?
Yep.
But it's like, okay, you still have your life to live. They're young. They have their entire life, right? So what is this? And it's not always, I don't always get it right, obviously, right? But trying to get into that mindset of like, okay, what is this? And one thing that has also helped me is, because I'm a planner and a avoider, but kind of just taking a step back when I know something's coming up to say like, okay. And actually, who kind of talked about this on her podcast, I don't know if you've seen, but Michelle Obama, of saying, okay, this is not something I want to do. So in order to support myself, I have to kind of mentally come up with things so that I won't do it. So for her, she said she didn't want to go to the inauguration. So she decided she wouldn't have anything to wear, right? Because if she had something to wear, it's really easy to kind of fall into what people, the right thing. And we're talking from her, not my, opinion, but for her, the right thing, obviously, right? Former first lady, your husband's going, why would you, again, that wife thing, right? Right? That's your husband. He's a former president. You stand by him no matter what, right? She clearly, for her own personal conviction, made another choice, right? And she said, her words, she had to trick herself into doing that. So I think it's a constant, I won't say battle, but it's a constant evolution.
Yeah.
Because one other thing I've experienced as well is, especially with my husband, like, there's a lot of times I know he didn't want to do stuff, like a lot. And he shows up. And he literally shows up, right? So that means sometimes I have to show up. Yeah, I do. I have to go to whatever the thing is, right? Maybe I'm like, we take 2 cars, we come in, you want to stay all night, I'm leaving at 10 o'clock. Maybe that's the conversation. But, trying to kind of keep things in balance because I do believe, we do have to show up for people who show up for us.
Yeah, this has been something very prevalent for me as I ended up navigating a conversation just with my partner like last week, 2 weeks ago, around whether or not I wanted to play in a volleyball league that we've been doing together for the last few seasons. And gosh, it really threw me for such a loop because to what you're saying, it was literally one of those moments for me where like, I don't want to play this season, but I already committed and I know he wants me to. And so it was this back and forth and constant grappling. And I know he does so many things for me. I really sat with it and I ended up having a conversation. We had multiple conversations about it. And I think I will say walking away from that, it really illuminated for me the power of communicating. Because
Yes.
if I would have just done it, but I didn't want to and kind of like fought through it with resentment, that would have came out towards him. And then that wouldn't have left him feeling good either. But we were able to talk about it. And then that unearthed so many other things about like how I think and what he thinks and blah, blah, blah. And it ended up bringing us so much closer. And I think what I'm starting to see back to that conversation of like the struggle and the discomfort is like it's in these moments where they're like these like miracles or like blessings that happen because maybe something happens that you weren't expecting, conversation unfolds, you were uncomfortable, but then you talked about it and then you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize you were feeling that way. So I don't know. I'm really trying to see those moments more for having more appreciation, I think we could say, and seeing the lessons that they hold. But I so hear you on the struggle of it because, again, just whatever it was 2 weeks ago, last week, I'm like, oh my God, it's that thing again where it's
Yeah.
like, I want to honor myself, but I'm thinking of him and I'm thinking of others. So it's very, very relatable. I wanted to ask you, you've been touching on like the business piece here and there. And I mean, we met at the business networking event and
Yeah.
you shared, we had a lovely conversation before connecting on this podcast too about just what your business is, the unfoldings and all that. And maybe too, because I don't think we've touched on it yet, if you can just share with the audience firstly what you do with your beadwork, and then I'd love to just dive a little deeper on like how this business piece in your life fits in with the others. So let's start with a little background
Yeah. Okay.
on the
Yeah.
beading.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See? I told you I'm not a business person. A business person would say, hey, this is what we do. Yeah. So like I mentioned, I got introduced into beading as a child. Actually went to a Pan-Africanist type of school in Chicago on the South Side. And so what I've done is developed a beading practice for healing, right, through that creative process. So there's a lot of science behind mindfulness, specifically beading, even probably sewing by hand, right? The kind of the movement of stringing the beads really kind of puts us into a meditative state. It calms the nervous system, and thereby we can have, just a moment to kind of pause and get some type of rejuvenation. So we do all kinds of bead work, specifically with seed beads, which really is what promotes the mindfulness because they're very, very small, right? They're a couple millimeters wide. We also have a color theory system that we use as well. I don't know, you can probably see behind me here.
Yes, it's beautiful.
So we have a color. Thank you. We have a color for each month, and we focus on the theme of that color. So we developed a 12 color system based on, some historical things. If people are into chakras, you'll find a little bit of that in it as well. But it's really mostly about the science behind different colors. So for example, we know the color red represents passion. So here in the States, we would say, love and that kind of thing. Like maybe let's say like China, red is for good luck, right? But red universally is known, as valor, blood, right? So it's a very strong color, right? And then there's things like white, here we might wear black to a funeral to represent death, in other cultures, people wear white, right? To symbolize that spirituality. But we also maybe baptize people in white, right? So there's these universal kind of meanings that go behind it that we include in it. There's some cultural kind of preservation part of it as well, but we mostly use it for that mindfulness, that healing, and also building community, bringing people together. We know that social isolation and loneliness is a pandemic, specifically here, in the US with technology, whether you want to look at the political climate, however you want to look at it, right? It's really important that we kind of get this human to human kind of contact again. right? That's really, really vital and really important because a lot of people do feel alone, right? And because of how society has shaped so drastically, really, in the last maybe, I feel like maybe the last 10, 15 years, right? Whereas before there was these social and kind of societal and cultural norms. Now is we live in a very much more individualized society. I mean, there's still families, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of families that, love each other and cultures are strong and communities are strong, but it's a lot more individualized, right? We're really encouraged to speak our mind, live our truth, right? If something doesn't feel well, we shouldn't do it. And it's like, well, like, yes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yes, definitely. You honor yourself, but we have to kind of get to a place where we're interdependent. That is where strong communities come when we're interdependent. And that's really the ideal, hopefully in like a partnership. So we like to promote that. People coming together to, just have fun, heal, get with the colors. We have a studio and we do lots of, parties, some retreats and we also have open studio. Actually, we have open studio on Saturday. This Saturday and next Saturday.
Yay.
Yeah. So people can, kind of come by. We do workshops off site, right? So we've worked with all different types of populations, just really, and it's really amazing. Some people, they make their beads and it's, like, thank you. I made my bracelet. Other people really take to it, right? Really take to it, really, really get into it. And so that's always a joy to see as well.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating how many, we can call it like layers, you've built into the practice of beadwork. Because like I'm a total newbie, so I don't know like anything about this. And you go on to say the color theory and the mindfulness piece, and you have so many different segments of your business with like the events and all that. Like I feel like it's just such a, for lack of an overused word, holistic, integrative, like
Yeah.
really just like
Mm-hmm.
creature that you've built. And I'm fascinated by founder story always. And you alluded to the beginnings of your business with your husband kind of
Mm-hmm.
nudging you. But
Yeah.
knowing all of the, like, we can say layers and complexities to what you've built today and what exists in your business, I'm just wondering, like, how did that come to be? And maybe you could take us to like those beginnings of, your husband nudging you, oh, you should do this. Were you doing beading just on the side and then he
Mm-hmm.
saw
Mm-hmm.
like the monetary potential of it? Did you already have these ideas of the color theory and all these different facets of it? Like, walk us through the evolution because this is very
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So it's been some time.
Yeah.
So, I started it kind of as a brand, so to speak, in 2012. It didn't become a business, until several years later. But it started with, what it started with? It started with social isolation. Now that
Hmm.
I'm really coming to that, I'm glad you asked me that. So I'm not from Connecticut, although, I've been here a number of years. As I mentioned, born and raised in Chicago. I moved to New Hampshire as a teenager and was there for eighth grade in high school. Then I moved to Alabama for undergraduate.
Mm.
I moved to Ohio for graduate school, then eventually came here. So, although my husband has a huge family, I didn't feel like I had a big community for me. And in my mind, that was a difficult kind of experience and dynamic to go through. Now, I have to be very transparent and say, I think sometimes, at least for me, I was very focused on what I imagined. The reality is, it's very possible that I missed, other, opportunities, right, with people who were, from Connecticut. I was just very focused on where's my tribe, the people who
Mm.
get down like me, right?
Yeah.
And I founded the beading and the beadwork really as a social kind of thing, right? And just, it was something that I enjoy. Always loved beads because, like I said, was introduced to it as a child. And I started, going around calling, libraries like, hey, can I come do a free workshop? And what do you think they said? Absolutely, right? Free. We don't
Yeah.
have to pay. Yes, come
Yeah.
on, come on. Right,
Say
exactly.
less.
So, right. So yeah, so I started doing that. I think my husband started nudging me because it went beyond just the beads. I would
Mm.
literally bring in like wall hangings, like with the little strips, because I had to create like this ambiance. I had a playlist. I had little mats. I had the triangles that they went in,
Oh
right?
wow.
I
So
had
you were
all of the
curating like a whole setting, an
experience.
environment
Yeah,
too, an
it wasn't like,
experience.
oh,
Yeah.
right. And so, it took, it would take time. My dad would help both my parents actually. My dad was like, yeah, really? Seriously? Like, you really want to come in here and put up like a poster on the wall? Like, what?
Those are
So
some good
after time,
supportive parents coming along for
like,
free to help you with
he's like,
that.
okay, okay, okay. But I'm sure he was like, this lady's crazy, right?
Oh my gosh.
Um, But I recognized, I would rent space, right? So I would rent, and I mean, back then, I don't know, maybe $100, $200. I'm sure now it'd probably be, maybe triple that. But I would rent space, and I finally got to a place, big discussion with my husband. I'm like, okay, I want to rent a space, right? My husband, entrepreneur, and very wealth kind of generating type of mindset. So he's like, we're not renting. If anything, first of all, he's like, he doesn't rent. He's not renting. We need to purchase. I'm like, dude, we can't purchase. I just want to have these and stuff like, what?
Oh my gosh.
So that took, I don't even know, like some time. But I'm like, no, I just need, there's a place where I can set the beats up. I can invite people in. I'm not like, bringing, 4 and 5 bins, right, up and down stairs. Eventually he's like, okay, because he's like, okay, well, that could be a business expense. So it has to be a business, right? Then, we can do it. So I'm like, okay. I had to kind of get in my mind, that this can be kind of a gift, right? It can be, and like to your point, be surprised, right? I have no idea what it, even to this day, I have no idea, right? I know what I would like, right? I know what my vision is, but I don't really know exactly where it can and might even go. So after that, opened a small studio, and the rest really is history. Started with 300 square feet, moved to 500 square feet. Now we have 1,200 square feet, right? And
Ooh.
so, yeah, 1,200 square feet. So we're constantly kind of refining the offerings. I've had those moments, as you were mentioning. One big thing I really wanted, like really bad, was retreats. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's beads, so we have to have a retreat. And the retreats were not retreating.
Yep.
I
It wasn't
retreated, right?
happening.
Yeah, it just wasn't. And I shouldn't even say. I just had a retreat the other day, and there were people there. So I love all of you guys, right? But in my mind, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
thinking, hey,
The
the retreat, you have,
expectation. Hmm.
you think 20, 30 people, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I learned to go into my math analytical roots to say, okay, my job is to be clear and succinct and put what I have to offer, make it available. Different things. Maybe, I had a bunch of things, but let's say maybe between, let's say between 2 and 5 offerings, so to speak, right? I'm going to put it out there, put the intention out there, and I'm going to let the data guide me. Not what I think, what the data says,
Mm.
and that's how I ended up with Open Studio,
Hmm.
and it's been a man. I'm like, you mean to tell me you guys just wanted me to come here and just, because like, we have snacks, we have, people come, they just, some people just stay, it's maybe a couple hours, maybe 3 hours, and some people stay the whole
Yeah.
time, just like,
Yeah.
looking at beads. I'm like,
And open studio is just like open hours. Someone can come in and out whenever they want. Like it's
someone
just,
can come in, they can purchase. A lot of people purchase. Some people just make things. Like the
yeah.
other day, I had a group of young women. They came and made like a waist bead, in
Hmm.
like maybe an hour and a half. And normally it takes a lot longer than that,
Yeah.
But they came in, they were focused. They, went to the table. I think one of them bought something too, and they just enjoyed the time. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just so interesting because I'm like, you guys could have just told me that, but
Oh, this is like, I love that you share this because this is like, again, it's like very resonant for me because it's bringing me back to like ideas that I've made for my business too. Like last year, I tried to, similar actually, not per se a retreat, but like a group program, like a group offering that I did launch earlier in the year. That was amazing. Like I had 7 people in the group. Like it was so special and intimate. It was like a 10-week personal branding journey. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it again. So that I tried to do it again. And the group experiences weren't group experiencing. So me
yes,
too.
yes,
I was
yes,
like, all right. And maybe back to that original question or thing we had touched on of like the goals versus like how much do you pursue the thing versus how much do you back off. And yeah, it's been something so top of mind for me where I'm like, if there's resistance, like if there's really force that like keeps blocking me, like maybe that's an invitation to just like either try something new. Or I love the example you shared because it was just you like asking or opening it up to the people of what they think and letting that kind of dictate and almost having like an organic thing. It really sounds like a surrender moment where you kind of like let off the reins and you're like, okay.
A little bit. And I think you and I talked about it too. So
Yeah.
for a long time, the business was it I would say it's been a business maybe the last 2 years because I was doing it and I was, making money and doing all the tax returns and all of that. But I was also working full time.
Yeah.
Why? Because I felt safe that way. Right. So at the end of the day, you know what I mean? I didn't have that kind of like vulnerability there. You know what I mean? And so what I realized is that one, things change a lot. So one big thing that happened, you're talking about change, the recent cuts, the government cuts, that took a nice chunk of revenue for us, like a good chunk, right?
Yeah.
So now, one of the really exciting things about business is, you can create products, right? We can create, I mean, you and I today could be like, no, we're doing a branding and beading thing, right? You know what I mean?
Joining
Right? That's the
forces.
power
Yep.
of having a business, right? You can't necessarily go to your boss and say, listen, I'm doing X, right? It doesn't work that way. And so that's the power of it. But you also have the issue of bringing that revenue. And so I did surrender because I'm like, okay, this is going to stress me out, right? Like, and I figured I'll be here anyway, right? It's Saturday, it's open studio. People have more, they can do more. And it's funny. I was doing a lot of waste workshops, which I still do. I've been doing those for quite some time, even before the business part. And it's pretty much a core part of the business. I'll probably always do it. I have some people who love it. But I realized that I was kind of putting a cap on it, right? So you come to the event, maybe you spend $50, you come, you enjoy, you leave. With Open Studio, people come, they might spend $50. I've had people spend $200, right? Because they're
Mm.
just buying different things. They want to buy this. Hey, what about that? They're calling people. Hey, do you like this? Right? So I realized even the word open, right?
Hmm.
Even making it open where you come whatever time. I mean, obviously within the hours, but maybe you stay for 10
Yeah.
minutes and buy something. Maybe you sit and make something, right? They have more flexibility. And so that was really interesting to experience. I'm like, really? But yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. So surrendering is very, um, it's tough for me because I was really, I mean, maybe similar to you, reared that, you got to put the time in and you got to invest the time,
Oh yeah.
right? Nothing, if you don't work it, right? Well, I can't remember the
Oh yeah.
exact scripture, but it's something like, oh, faith without works is dead. That's the scripture, right? And I didn't grow up particularly religious, but, just the idea of that, right?
Yeah.
That you have to put the work and time in. But what I realize is when you're aligned, you put purposeful time in, but you don't really have to work that hard.
Mm.
You really don't. It might take you time to get aligned, right?
Yep.
But it's like Apple now. Apple's like, yep, here go another. Here's iPhone 30. I'm not an iPhone
Yep.
user,
Yeah.
but they've built, right? They've built not only the brand, but also the operation where, you know, it just kind of falls in line. So I learned that, I don't know if you're a spiritual person, but God will allow you, if you
Oh
want
yeah.
to do it your way, God will absolutely allow you to do that, right? That's free
Mm-hmm.
will. It's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to force you, right? If you
Yep.
want to go and post 25 times a day on Instagram and, call people and, whatever the thing is that we're trying to do, you can do that. But I'm learning like you can take a step back too. And, you can be, what you say, surprised, the word that you said. You would be amazed, right, at how another option can emerge.
Yeah. Oh, this is literally like speaking to my soul right now, as I have been really praying on this piece in particular with business, but mostly like what I've been doing with Studio Domka, but other aspects of my life too, of like you mentioned it earlier, that word control. It's like, where am I trying to run the show? Like, where am I not getting out of the way for God to essentially make it easier for me? Because well, I may not be posting, on Instagram 25 times a day or doing some. There's other things that there's like a comfort behind it. You get into these routines. Maybe they've worked for you before. You were doing things one way and you found success. And then over time, they kind of like started slowing down, probably because there's like an invitation for a change or something to shift. But then you keep trying to do it or you're trying other things and you're like, wait a second, like maybe love that word open. Like if you open yourself up to another way
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
possibility, it could be easier. So I so love that you shared that because it's very personal to me. And I don't know, for people tuning in and listening to, like, if there's been points in your life, or maybe you're in a season right now where something just feels very like a struggle, like a constant grind, and you're either not getting the same spark or you're just not as fulfilled as you thought you would be, back to that authentic alignment, that could be your surefire clue or signal like, hey, you gotta just like take a step back, pray
Yeah.
on it, really connect with something that could be there that you're not seeing. I think because of the last year with meeting my partner and also just like all these questions I've been asking of the podcast, exploring this topic of change as I'm kind of looking deeper into my own journey, it's really strengthened my faith journey too. And with my partner, brought me so much closer to God and just handing it over and trusting Him to figure it out for me. Because I'm guilty of, again, the control and thinking, like, oh no, I got this. Like, I'll figure this out. And it's like, sometimes it's the discernment of maybe knowing, like, I actually don't know. And that's where that piece of like, all right, fully giving it up, fully surrendering and being open comes in. So that's very pertinent, literally in real time for me. So
Yeah. No, seriously. It just
yeah.
even returning to the workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I and I wasn't even out there that long, maybe I don't know, 6, 7 months, right?
Yeah.
Because my husband's like, he gotta be at least, no, you gotta, 6 months. And I think I love him dearly, but I think for him, because he has a career and they love him. And it was a blessing to see that. Cause I'm like, okay, this is possible because he's a total entrepreneur person, and ended up embracing a career, just, having children. We have investment properties, right? So you have those responsibilities. And so, embracing that work. And I've seen him change, right? To say, hey, this career thing is kind of cool, right? Particularly because, he's really good at what he does and they love him. And so I think it became even more of a passion for him to see me, right? Because he's like, okay, now you're the business person now. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
He's
no,
like
I'm
living
not this way. Hold on.
vicariously.
And so he's like, no, you gotta keep it time, which I understand that. Um, but ending up recognizing that, again, going back to, okay, this might be good for the business, but what's good for me, right? What's good for me?
That question again.
I've
Yeah,
done a
full
lot
circle.
of work around, I am not this business. I'm just not. You know what I mean? I'm a human being. This is an extension of me and all of that, but I'm a human living person that deserves to have a weekend, right? As opposed to, and that's why I ran from like open studio and these types of things because, now that's every Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was really resistant to that. And it's still not every Saturday that I do it, but kind of trying to fit in where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do such and such this way because I want to have this time. And it doesn't really work that way or didn't work that way for me. So re-entering the workforce is awesome. One, because, I can, right? Having the skill set and analytics, having that skill set, being able to be really focused. And it also helps my analytical mind, figuring things out and balancing it out with the creative
Yeah,
thing that I do on
for
the
one
weekend.
minute, for context for people listening, this is you speaking to you going back to your full time job, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
while still
Mhm.
running your business on the side. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. So I had time where, I was a full-time entrepreneur and what I thought it would be like, it wasn't that way for me. Now the reality is too, I mentioned the kind of economy, right, with the federal cuts. My son's a senior, right? Had this happen later, while he is away, that's a totally different dynamic, right? So it could also be timing. But what I thought it would be, it was not like how it is on Instagram, honey. Let me tell you, okay?
Oh, yeah.
For me, right? You have your own time, which is true. I did have my own time, but it was a struggle sometimes to structure that time. And I realized that my business was still leaning on me. It wasn't time for me to lean on the business, right? The business wasn't strong enough yet for me to
Yeah.
lean on it at that particular time. And so it was great to just now I feel great about, working. It's great now. I don't have that conflict because I used to have the conflict of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this work. And I enjoy analytics, right? But there's always those kind of, moments you meet people and they're like, oh my gosh, this could be so big, right? Your business is going to take off, like, and all of these things. And so now I'm really clear about like, yeah, it is going to take off in time, right?
Yeah.
But right now at this moment, I'm really happy with where I am.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about your sentiments on the balance of both, on returning back to your full time job, also balancing the side business, how that is leaving you feeling, but maybe also the question of how that original decision was made. Was it something that you embraced with open arms? Was there resistance to it? Because, you know, with that, gosh, I've interviewed several people on the season thus far around these transitions of like they started their business, they left, or they started a different one. And sometimes it's a feeling of like, yeah, no, it was time. And it's like, I'm done, like clean, like, wipe your hands, I'm good, walk away. Other times it's like, man, it's hard because your feelings are in that business sometimes. There's attachment, identity, whatever, all that stuff. So, how was that decision for you?
So what I learned now through that time is that it's what I was going through personally, right?
Mm,
I had to go through that transition to learn to get aligned, really. I just had a little bit too much stuff going on. So, um, it was an extremely stressful moment that I was in prior to, leaving the first time and everything like that. So I just made in my mind, I was stepping away for a minute because most of the things that I do are on the weekend, right? They're on the weekend and in the evening. So I never really needed like daytime hours anyway, right?
mm,
Um, but funny enough, it was going pretty well. We had a consistent kind of what do you call clientele, kind of booking, very lucrative workshops actually. So booking the workshops and they were going really well. People were really, really responding to them very well. And so I thought, well, this is my passion, right? And this is a good time, right? I'm looking at the data. Hey, this is a good time. And it was a while. It was maybe a year, right? It wasn't like 2 months. It's like a year, right? So I would have never thought here, that, I didn't think about, federal cuts, those types of things.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I made the decision to step away and step out on faith. I'm putting that in quotes because, because what I learned now is that I needed to get aligned, right?
Mm,
Because I really stick to this idea that when we are aligned, right, things flow better. Even if it's something difficult, right? Even if you're training for a marathon, you might be running every day. That's not fun, right? But if you're in alignment and that's what you're supposed to be doing, you get up every day at the same time, you're aligned, right? You have a schedule, right? I had a little bit too much going on because I was in fear. So I had
mm,
multiple offerings, right? I
mm-hmm.
had I had a membership. I'm selling actual product. I'm doing workshops. I'm also vending. I'm doing networking, right?
Love
Again,
that.
on the weekend, right? On the weekend. A little bit during the evening, but mostly on the weekend. But I realized, okay, you have to get aligned and you have to put your faith behind what it is that you're doing because you have too many you know what I mean? It's just too many offerings, so to speak. And so I had to step away to recognize that. I had to really step away to recognize it. And I was able to recognize it when now you don't have the 9 to 5 to contend with. even
Yeah.
time wise, right? So I'm able to really look at, actually, this is my pattern. My pattern is to be over busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? My pattern is
Oh yeah.
to fill up my feet. You know what I mean? My pattern is
Oh
like,
yeah.
it used to be the evening and the weekend. Now it's, in the daytime as well. That's the pattern. What is that? What is that about? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What, and then those business principles, right? Not about what I think and what I want. Cause like I said, I wanted the retreat because I'm like, that's perfect, right? Now we can get together and do beads. It's like, okay, well, what do people want to spend their money on? They're spending their hard earned money. What do they want to spend it on? And I also learned that, developing a customer base, a robust customer base, and a robust operating model. Marketing too, but a robust operating model and a robust customer base, that's the foundation, And I had some of that, but I don't know that it was robust. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to kind of learn that. And then when it's like, okay, damn, am I gonna go back to work? That may be a couple months, and then you're like, hold on, I'm absolutely going back to work, right? So now, now it's like, okay, mentally kind of getting there, right, and doing it differently. I had
Yeah.
to do a whole. I mean, I may be these beads right here. You might not be able to see,
Oh,
but I
I
had to
do.
make,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I had to make
Mm-hmm.
beads and intentions around attracting the right role, right? Like one of
Mm-hmm.
my things was value based, that can go there and bring value, because that's when we're successful. Like, if you bring value at your job, they're gonna love you, right? As long as you're bringing value, right? Bring value and get value. What do I want out of it? Is it money? Is it time? Whatever that thing is. Skill building, right? Embracing my career and also the business. I don't have to choose. I don't. You know what I mean? And so being open to continuing to grow my skills in my career. Because I'm gonna be
Yeah.
very honest. Um, my mindset before that was always, this is my role. I'm gonna do this role. Because I'm doing this role to get my foundation because it's keeping me from my business. You know?
Yeah.
And once I got to my business, I recognized, no, mm-mm. Your business, once it's time and once you're aligned, it's going to happen when it's supposed to. This is a career that like I said, I got my bachelor's and my master's. Let me give this the real time it deserves. You know what I mean? And really continue to grow there. So picking up different coding, right? So I always did SQL coding, SAS coding. Do I want to learn Python, right? What else growing, right? How else do I want to grow? And it's a great feeling now, because now I'm not distracted by
Mm-hmm.
my or even other people's idea of what Balebé should be. Balebé
Mm-hmm.
is where it's supposed to be, right? It's where it's
Yeah.
supposed to be right now.
Yeah, and I imagine that so much of the pressure to make it succeed, to bring in income, like all of that stuff that comes with running a business dissipated now that you don't have to put all the weight on it. You have something else. And I'll just say, I think it's so cool and like fascinating that you have this like very analytical math side of you that
Yes.
is like your full time. But then Belebe is so creative and like intuitive. And I don't know, it honestly is kind of like I want to say it's a bit surprising to see that you are someone who's so it feels like so evenly split down the middle of being left brained and right
Yeah,
brained
yeah, yeah,
and literally
yeah,
living
for sure.
your life from that place. Like I usually it's like you hear of people who are creative and they're like pursuing all other creative intuitive things, and
Right, right.
for me
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like for me like the analytical part of me, well actually I'll say where analytics comes in for me is like wanting to control and add structure of like doing things a certain way and having rituals and
Percent. That's
routines.
definitely analytics. Yes, yes,
That's
for sure.
that but it's really fascinating to see how your careers have been like vessels for you to flex both left and right brain. Super cool.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen that. So
yeah. No,
power to
it's
you, girl.
thank you, thank you. I'm just, I'm really just trying to, just embrace it. Take it one
Yeah.
step at a time. Like you said, that word surrender, where I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, right? I really don't know. I know
Mm-hmm.
what is my big vision, right? For Balebé is to really, be a catalyst for transformation through beadwork, right? We would love to have other studios at some point if that's what's supposed to happen. But before I do any of that, I have to make sure Bahati's good, right? Because that is really a part of the mission, is being a, holistic person in terms of wellness, every area of wellness. And so I have to walk that walk, and I do, but walk it even more fiercely now. And I think once I do that, whatever's supposed to happen with my life, right? Not just the business, also the career, and on will happen and unfold.
Well, I will just say especially the last several guest interviews that I've had, I think you are my last guest interview of this season.
What?
There might be another one. There might be one more. But in terms of like my more structured one-on-one interviews, you, I think, will be my last. And I'll just say the last 4 or 5 have been conversations that, I don't know, I have the guests, I'm asking questions just like about their journey, their life, and they are saying things to me that I'm like, are you in my brain? Kind of a thing. Yeah. Whether it's your life journey, your experiences, personal things you've navigated. I mean, the beautiful stories you've shared about your partnership with your marriage, and especially this last piece on the business and the evolution, and also the balance of having Balebé as now what feels like a more part-time thing, stepping away from that, trusting, surrendering, going back to something that once was, also loving that, the piece that you shared on the value. I mean, I want to just say thank you. I feel very seen, and I really am hopeful that for people tuning in, whether it is a season of change that you're navigating in partnership, whether that's marriage or otherwise, or also in business or side passions or projects, there's just so much, I feel like, from your shares and what we just kind of went back and forth on that could be garnered. So I really do hope people leave this conversation with some good nuggets, because I surely have felt seen. So thank you.
Yeah, no,
thank you for being so open.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's been amazing, just, having and taking the time, right? Having the space, taking the time just to reflect. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. I want to close with my last final question that I ask every single guest on every episode. This show is called the Homecomings Podcast, and home is a central core theme of my brand and business, everything that I do. So I always love to ask, what is your favorite memory of home?
Ooh, my favorite memory of home. I would have to say doing dance. I love dance. So I do love beads, but I love dancing. So just anytime I'm on a dance floor, I'm home. Anytime I'm on a dance floor, I'm home. And beading too.
Yes. We can't forget the beading. That's so great.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go, can you please plug yourself? Where can people find you? Where can people attend some of your amazing beading workshops? I feel like I have to get my butt over to your studio.
You do. Yes. So thank you for asking that. So we have a studio in Windsor, Connecticut. So 88 Day Hill Road in Windsor, Connecticut. We're right across from Public Works near the Marriott. So the Marriott's right, we're literally like right next door. We are online, of course. So balebe.com, BALEBE.com. And that's B like boy. We're on Instagram. We have several Instagrams: balebe.beads, balebe.beading studio, and balebe.stem series. And we also have a page on Facebook. So follow us if you're into mindfulness, if you're into intentionality, if you want to just slow it all down for a little bit. We will absolutely serve you. We'd love to have you. And this is the place where you want to be.